Being a caregiver is a labor of love, but sometimes you need to get away from the day-to-day work to recharge. John and June's Mission is a nonprofit that gives caregivers a much-deserved break. The group leads free treks into the Idaho wilderness, giving you time to focus on your own well-being in a beautiful place. Plus, you could receive a voucher to hire help to care for your loved one while you're away. July 27th through the 30th, they're doing a backpacking trip into the Payette National Forest, but spots are going quickly. Go to johnandjunesmission.org to learn more. Today on CityCast Boise, happy Friday! Emission testing is dead, crazy landlord fees are no more, and Bundy's barbecue standoff was a bust. I'm rounding up the news with contributors Jimmy Dawson and Heath Drusen. Plus, Heath tries to convince me to care about people on bikes racing around downtown this weekend. It's Friday, July 7th. I'm Emma Arnold, and this is what Boise's talking about. Hi, Jimmy. Hi, Heath.
Emma, hello.
Hey, Emma.
Thanks for being here. We had a pretty kind of slow news week, but still actually kind of a lot going on. Jimmy, let's start with you because several new laws in Idaho just took effect July 1st. Let's talk admissions testing. Let's start with that. It's gone. It's done. And Jimmy, you just had this story on Boise State Public Radio about it. What is the deal here? And are there any concerns about rolling back environmental protections?
Ooh, man, yeah. So this is something that I think a lot of people in the Treasure Valley are celebrating. A lot of people are kind of like, why are we doing this? Why are we rolling this back? Because Ada and Canyon counties were the only places in the state to require emissions testing because of our poor air quality over the past couple decades, really. And so that program was implemented in order to reduce vehicle emissions, trying to make it so we could breathe during inversions and not add to like the wildfire smoke issues that we already have in the summer. But state lawmakers back in 2022 were like, hey, look, the Idaho Department of Environmental Quality is constantly monitoring this. They're saying that we've significantly improved our air quality, not to mention that newer vehicles, by design have fewer emissions, whether they're EVs or just more efficient, right? And so they thought that it was time to, not force people to go to those little emission stands in the gas station or Emerald Lanes, a bowling alley parking lot, if you're on the bench, to get those checked and pay $20 for the privilege anymore. And so that went away. As you mentioned, there are some people who are like, well, I'm still worried about our air quality. DEQ does say like this shouldn't affect it. If anything, it'll just plateau or, slow the rate of getting better. But that's what they maintain. I'm sure people still have a lot of questions about it, but for now, we no longer have to get our vehicles checked and plugged into those weird little reader things.
Well, it's interesting. We just had an episode recently where we talked about how the city of Boise has some pretty aggressive green goals to fight climate change. So how are cities going to react to this? It seems kind of like another example of the Republican state majority targeting liberal Boise. Is that fair, or am I reading into that?
I mean, it might be, but to be honest, I haven't really heard a lot of pushback from it when it was debated in 2022. Certainly Democrats did raise the issue of, I don't know. I think that we should at least keep some process in place that we could potentially re-implement these sorts of vehicle emissions testing, which they did. There is a process by which they can reconvene a council to do this, but as of right now, that is not the case in Idaho that we have one anymore.
I'm personally thrilled about it, not because I mind the $20 or even the air quality thing, but because every time, I think, and I've talked to lots of women, this is a universal female experience, I think. I have been sexually harassed by every single emissions guy I've ever had to deal with. I don't know if it's just because they know you're captive and you just need that piece of paper, but it's like this very universal thing. So I don't have to get sexually harassed by the emission guys anymore. Air quality be damned, I guess. But it's
one annual sexual harassment, please. State mandated.
Let me pay you $20 for that. Thank you so much. Well, let's talk about this new law that seems like pretty great to me that says landlords now have to charge reasonable fees to tenants. What does this mean for renters in Boise and across the state?
Yeah, so this was from Senator Ali Rabi. She's a Boise Democrat who also is the executive director of Jesse Tree, which is all about helping low-income people stay in their homes or, not get evicted from any place that they rent. And so she has been talking about this for years with, a bipartisan group of lawmakers as well to try to rein in what she sees as ridiculous, excessive fees, which, some examples that she gave during the debates and during the, committee hearings were like, you have to pay $100 every single day that your rent is late, or, you have to pay $500 for this one thing. And so like these fees just keep stacking up and stacking up. And apparently under Idaho law, any sort of money that you send to the landlords or your property management company goes towards knocking down your accrued fees and not necessarily your rent, which then makes it easier for you to be evicted. So the law is pretty light on details. It just says landlords have to charge, quote, reasonable fees. Something in there that's more concrete is that landlords can't, if you have a written lease agreement, they have to give you 30 days notice if they want to change any sort of fee rate or if they want to implement a new fee. So then at least you have a heads up as to, something coming down the pike instead of, hey, this month I'm charging you a $200, lint removal fee or something. I don't know.
Well, good. I mean, I think that definitely more needs to be done there, but it's a start and an improvement anyway. There's also a few like really high profile bills that won't take effect until January 1st, right?
Yeah, that's right. So, for example, and I know we've talked about this on CityCast Boise, but the ban on transition-related care for minors is supposed to go into effect January 1st of 2024, pending the outcome or any sort of action with the federal lawsuit that's been filed. A lot of those have been struck down in federal courts recently, so we'll see how that goes. But then there's another one called the Clean Slate Act, which would allow people with certain offenses, non-sexual, non-violent offenses to have their court records sealed. They can apply after 5 years of completing their sentence. And as long as they don't commit another crime within that time frame, then you can apply through the court system to make it so that's kind of out of the public domain.
Okay. Well, interesting. Thanks for keeping track of that. And we'll check in, obviously, on those other bills that are coming up for January 1st. Heath, let's turn to you. You've been very quiet this whole time. We have to ask you about something that we very much avoid on this podcast, but I think it's finally time to check in. What's the latest with Ammon Bundy and his so-called barbecue standoff?
Yeah, it's I'm not quite sure what to call it, to be honest.
I feel like that's pretty good.
I mean, so yeah, so far it's kind of been Ammon Bundy walking around his orchards, and some of his close friends kind of hanging out there. Whether or not it's a standoff, kind of hard to say. I think what's notable, and just for people who don't go down the rabbit holes I go down and maybe aren't familiar, St. Luke's, the hospital system, is suing him, and his kind of right-hand man, Diego Rodriguez, whereabouts unknown right now. They're both being sued by St. Luke's. They haven't showed up to court. So St. Luke's keeps taking action, and there's been a bunch of rulings against Ammon Bundy and Diego Rodriguez because they're not showing up. So basically the trouble's kind of piling up. There was a civil arrest warrant that was issued for Ammon Bundy. And this standoff-ish thing started with that, where essentially the Gem County sheriff was theoretically going to go arrest him. There's been a series of sort of drive-outs, I guess, there. And then Ammon Bundy didn't get arrested. Some of his followers were kind of blocking the land a little bit. It's been weird. But that's what's been happening. What's notable, though, I think what's most notable for me as somebody who's watched this guy for years and years and interviewed him a number of times, is that nobody showed up to the standoff. I mean, not nobody, but very few people. Whereas in the past, the Bundys have had two very prominent standoffs with the federal government, one in Bunkerville, Nevada, one in Malheur National Wildlife Refuge in Oregon, and people did come from across the country to support them. Now you've seen that that change a lot. The only people who really came out to support Ammon this time were his sort of close associates who all live, almost all of them live right around Boise, right around the Treasure Valley. I do think that he's alienated a lot of people, and I think he's kind of slipping as far as standoff mojo.
Yeah, I think you're right. You mentioned the police going out there. That's happened a couple times, right? But why hasn't he been arrested?
That is one of the weird details of this. At first, the Gem County sheriff said, we're worried that Ammon is going to be potentially violent. And certainly in the past, things have turned violent at these standoffs. One of Ammon's associates, Lavoy Finicum, was shot by state police in Oregon during the Malheur standoff, when police say he was running a checkpoint. There's controversy among Ammon's supporters about that, but there has been violence. The Gem County sheriff and Ammon Bundy made a series of comments that certainly evoked violence, talking about shotguns and having to take a stand. So yes, that certainly seemed like, there was a threat of that. It was a little weird that a sheriff said he couldn't arrest somebody because he was worried about this person confronting them. Because, I think a lot of people were kind of like, well, aren't you law enforcement? So he kind of backed off that. But then he's been out a couple times. Ammon hasn't been arrested. It's a little weird. I'm not quite sure why. Ammon does have a few supporters there that I guess are sort of blocking off the land. But so far, it's just been kind of almost like an implied standoff, because it's not like the sheriff is just sitting there with guns drawn, obviously waiting. So far, Ammon is still there, kind of racking up a warrant and court fines and all this stuff. But so far, nothing's happened. But the trial is scheduled to go on this month. I don't know that there's much of a chance that Bundy or Diego will show up, but we'll see. We'll see what happens when that trial date comes in a few days.
It's funny. We keep saying standoff, but is it a standoff if nobody shows up? I don't know like you said, I'm not really sure what we call that exactly.
If a stands off,
a standoffish standoff, and
nobody shows up, is it a standoff? I would say no. And I think it's funny in a way, but also we should be a little careful as journalists to, overblow what's happening. Because I don't think it is a standoff. And it's important to note, he had so many people come armed before to these two other actual standoffs, and they didn't show up, which is why it hasn't really turned into that. And I think it's important to note some of the reasons. He's really alienated a lot of people. Some people might be familiar with Eric Parker, who's the leader of the main 3%er militia group in Idaho. He was known as the Bundy sniper, or some other names, bridge sniper. He had his weapon pointed towards law enforcement in Nevada at the OG Bundy standoff. So he had a lot of skin in the game there. I shouldn't say almost. He didn't go to prison. He was convicted of just a misdemeanor after facing some charges that could have put him in prison for the rest of his life. He didn't go to prison, but he certainly took a big risk. And now he's been really kind of trashing Ammon on Twitter, and he's really he's sort of representative of some people who used to be supportive, who are like, this guy's really kind of turned his back on his supporters and he's kind of all about himself. Some of them bring up the possibility that that a lot of what Ammon's doing is sort of a grift to raise money for his People's Rights Network, which itself is very opaque as far as where that money's going. It's not really registered to be a nonprofit. So what's happening? But it's a very long way of saying Ammon's lost a lot of friends. He's lost a lot of friends. That part, there's no question. People who used to be very supportive of him are pretty mad right now and don't want to risk going to jail for, what a lot of people see as Ammon just sort of avoiding having his day in court. Yeah,
you mentioned his the People's Rights, his national anti-government group. So where does that leave them? Like, what happens now?
I'll be honest, as somebody who's reported on them for a long time, I kind of wonder if the national part of that was maybe more of a paper tiger than I thought, because you would think he's got theoretical chapters throughout the country. He's got theoretical chapters. I'd have to double check, but like at last check, it was the vast majority of states had some kind of presence online, but they're not coming. So you got to wonder how devoted those people are, how active those people are. How many of the people who, are there on paper are really in the group? This does seem to be exposing the group's weakness, whether it's sort of been on the wane, which it might be. I mean, we've seen a lot of far-right activists go into jail post January 6th, and that's picked up recently. And you got to wonder if some people also, like, maybe just with time, they're sort of less devoted and they're just like, I like not being in jail. People like not being in jail. It's like, it's this sort of simple thing that they sometimes gets overlooked in these complicated analyses. Like it's a big deal to go stand with somebody who you probably don't really know very well and risk your freedom to, protect them.
Yeah. And I feel like you said at the very beginning, these sad older gentlemen walking around apple orchards videos he's posting right now, probably not helping the cause a whole lot because they aren't real inspiring. They're more just kind of like, I don't know, like almost like breakup videos or something. Like he's so bummed that nobody's paying attention to him right now.
Yeah, it's a little weird. He's like, he's posted at least a couple of these long rambling videos where he's like walking around his orchard and like comparing overgrown branches to DC bureaucrats and saying they need to be trimmed. And it's, I will say it's not like, it's not must-see TV. It really kind of like, it's a little odd. Like he's just by himself walking around.
Yeah. Big old man yells at cloud energy, just sort of walking around, making sad videos. I don't feel like you're going to pull a whole lot of followers from that for sure.
Yeah. It's not the like sort of carefree days of Malheur when they were opening up boxes of dildos that that opponents sent them and sort of like shaking their fist at that. That was kind of entertaining.
Yeah, not a single box of dildos for poor Ammon. Well, we'll be keeping an eye on that. It's as always interesting to see what happens next with him. But let's end on a fun thing. I mean, fun. I guess for you more than me, but the Twilight Criterium is happening this weekend, which I have zero interest in, but I know you're both bike guys. Are you going? Are you excited?
I love it. I know nothing about professional bike racing, but I think it's an awesome event I think it's an awesome free event in Boise. It sounds like there might be some real mixed feelings here on the panel though.
Jimmy, what about you?
So I've always wanted to go. Like, I'm not super into watching professional cycling or anything. I like to ride my own bike, and I have several of them, and I maintain them, and I work on them and build them. But my only excuse is that I'm a wimp in the summer, even though I grew up in Lewiston, which, by the way, Boise, it gets hotter there than it does here.
Oh, crap. Really?
Yeah, yes. Oh. So
congratulations.
I'm just saying, like, First Capital, we're hotter than you, like, but all that said is I'm a wimp in the heat. And so like every time that the Twilight Criterium has come around, it feels like it's always been over 100 degrees. And I just don't want to be out on the sidewalk just watching cyclists go by. But since this weekend's weather is going to be at least a little better, I'll take the 90s. That's okay. I might just have to head down there and grab a beer and watch them while I'm sitting, and certainly not expending thousands of calories doing a competitive race.
Yeah, I feel like I don't have a fair assessment of if it's fun or not, because my only experience with it is driving downtown and then being like, it's Twilight Criterium, and you get stuck in all that traffic and you can't get anywhere. That's really my only exposure to it. It could be a really good time, but like you said, hot and lots of standing and waiting for bikes to go by. Is that a fair, Heath? Is that a fair assessment?
No. I mean, yes, but no. Here's my pitch. Okay. And again, I do not really follow bike racing. I don't know much about it, but I will say what's really cool about it is A, it's free. B, if you go to the pro races, it's at a time of day where it's already cooling off. So you can go there at sunset, and it's not too bad, unless it's like a horrific day, which it's not going to be this year. It's going to be, just the normal bad. So it's cooling off, and you can get right up there on the fence, and these guys are going by, and like you feel the whoosh go by, and like it's just like to see these pros going so much faster than you could even imagine going, except on an e-bike. Maybe it's really cool. Like you literally feel it, and like it's just something you don't get to experience very often. And the cool thing about it is like, you're not committed. Like you go there and you hang out for a bit, and like, you feel them go by, you go get a beer. And then when it wraps up, you're right downtown. And if you want to make a night of it, it's on a weekend. If you want to go grab a drink or a bite, you walk down, and it's a great atmosphere. People are super excited. They're, they're ringing the cowbell. I don't know. It's one of those things like how often are you going to get to go to a professional bike race at a really high level for free, and then just walk to your local downtown restaurant or watering hole and have fun. I don't know. It's good. I highly recommend it.
I don't know. You're selling it. You are selling it. You do make it sound pretty exciting and easy and true. Free. You're like totally free. A nice fun date for people to go to this weekend. Plus kind of, not in the Twilight Criterium, a little bit of local skin in the bicycling game, right? Talk to me about that.
Yeah.
Somebody, I don't know who's going to, but somebody please.
I think Jimmy knows this a little better than me.
Yeah, so Matteo Jorgensen, a Boise native guy, is actually in the Tour de France again this year. And, I'm just checking his latest standings. As we're recording this on Thursday, they've done 6 stages. And so far, he is, I believe, ranked 52. Let's check this out. 58, excuse me, but still 58 out of the 172 riders in what is cycling's premier event of the year is pretty incredible. I think his team is also, I believe, in the middle of the pack. As we've said, we know very little about professional cycling, but it is team-based and also individually based in certain areas. But yeah, so he seems to be doing pretty well individually, and his team, is better than average. So I think that's great. And it's nice that we, not to take away from Kristen Armstrong, because she's great, but we have another professional cyclist who's doing really well.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty exciting. Oh, all right, Heath. It sounds pretty fun. No, but I do encourage people to go. And who knows? Maybe I will. What'll be happening is I'll be down there accidentally doing something, and I'll be like, Twilight Criterium. And I'll just, for the first time in my life, park the car and go watch the bikes instead of sitting in traffic. So, all right. Well, thank you both so much. This has been really, really great. And yeah, who knows, Heath? Maybe a miracle will happen and you'll see me down there. But either way, thanks a bunch, and we'll see you again.
Thanks, Emma.
Thanks, Emma.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. The show is produced by Frankie Barnhill, Evelyn Avitia, A.K. L. Mootman, and me, Emma Arnold. Blake Hunter writes our Hey Boise newsletter with help this week from Adrian Gonzalez, and our music is by Up Is The Down Is The. If you enjoyed our show today, leave us a review. It helps other people find us. We'll be back Monday with more stories from around the city. Bye.